tobacco, but bubbling right below the surface was clear, was cannabis. That same day, a legislator in Maryland introduced a bill to ban e-cigarettes, for which I was on a show later in the day debating with him. And when asking him, why would you do this, he said, I just don't like the way it looks. So it's not based in science at all. Of course, Dale, it's visceral. It's a visceral anti-tobaccoism. So from Momo's point of view, we just want to make sure that consumers or patients have the best, most affordable delivery devices that they want to have access to. If it's medicine and it's prescribed, fine. But in terms of a consumer, you simply want to be able to get the device to be the most efficient, and therefore, when we think about most of our lives blowing joints in the wind, bongs, et cetera, water, to see the effectiveness of vape pens. And so I think I wrote a piece for a publication in February, and I said something like, I've seen the future of cannabis consumption in its vaporization through these pens. In the High Times office, they had a supplement coming out in a couple of months. There are 39, as you probably well know, Jim, 39 competing vapor pens today. And so High Times has added 20 pages of advertising around concentrates and the tools and things associated with it. And a couple of months after that, they'll have another supplement with 20 or 30 pages added regarding dab rings. So it's completely changed the nature of consuming cannabis and the marketplace that's emerging today.
I would just like to say that historically, lots of medicines have been smoked, from mullein to chamomile to marijuana, and that if we as consumers want to consistently have the opportunity to smoke raw plant material, that we need to own that and continue to have that both medicinally and recreationally.
Fear with our patients in particular, because I'm addressing a very different patient, I believe, than the one that walks into a dispensary. Because our patients don't, we have the alternative population to the dispensary patient. Our patient doesn't walk in there looking for flowers and for edibles. They have tried that and it hasn't worked because there's a huge population that doesn't know how to do that, doesn't feel comfortable doing that, or has done that and needs such a level of guidance because they're scared, they're elderly, they're too sick, or it's just not for them, because there's 360 million plus people in this country that could all benefit from cannabis. And there's a very small percentage-wise that's going to feel comfortable walking up to somebody and saying, I have colorectal cancer, what do you have for me? And having somebody say, well, we have this chocolate bar, and if you break it up into 6 pieces, each one is going to give you X number of cannabinoids, or terpenes, or whatever. It's not a one-size-fits-all model. And so these people, we actually go into their whole patient intake for them. We look at what their whole health history. We do special mixtures and combination of cannabinoid and terpene profiles. It's a different patient model. The only thing that we have in common sitting up here is we allow them to use the cannabis plant to treat them. And that's what we have in common here. But it's a different, like you say, it's an entrepreneurial thing, but it's a different form of medicine entirely. So it's not an either or, it's just different.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
And I think that point.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to be on this roundtable, because I think that as we start talking about these products, we start thinking about them in a very commercial way, right? Packaging and labeling and advertising. And yet there's still, this population of people that are seeking, like they don't care if it's even labeled as long as it's medicine that they need. They're not looking for fancy packaging, they're just looking for relief. And I think that that's something that may get lost as the commercialization of the market moves forward. So I want to ask one more question about kind of the labeling and packaging regulation. I want to start with James, and then we're going to move into talking about dabbing, because I think it's extremely important that we address this, because this is a huge move in the cannabis culture towards a very different way of looking at the plant and its uses. But before we start talking about that, I just wanted to get James and then maybe Wanda and Christy to talk about how packaging and labeling requirements, advertising, how you think that's changed, seeing as we had this kind of illicit substance, and now, I mean, James, the way you package it and label it, put it out there, it's really benign. I mean, you know, it's not, it's something you would just see on a shelf, you know, and so, you know, how have you kind of taken this idea of an illicit stigmatized substance and then tried to make it very user-friendly and appealing to people to get rid of that fear that you're doing something wrong or using something wrong? So maybe you can speak to that, and then maybe Christy and Wanda talk a little bit about how packaging and promotion goes into your business and how you work with your products.
Well, that's a very multi-layered question. You know, of course, each state now, Washington and Colorado, has different labeling requirements. And I would be remiss on this panel. Well, this would be what our package would look like for the cartridge for the vape pen. So, you know, it's got the strain indication, and they're indica, sativa, hybrid. Each one is a different color. And of course, on the back, we have our disclaimers and our California. There's different versions for different states, but in California, we're still under the Prop 215 SB 420 framework, which I see some of our esteemed attorneys in the room here, and we're still having grades, so I can have packaging. I've had 2 customers in San Diego that were rated by a multi-jurisdictional task force, including DEA and Homeland Security, and were put in handcuffs. His mother happened to be visiting the dispensary and was put in handcuffs for 9.5 hours. So it's great that we have all this progression and labeling and standards and so forth, but the war is very, very far from the time, you know, so when I talk about advertising or labeling, I think in Colorado it gets, they've been free, you know, people were on a tour of 100,000 square foot grow, they've got licenses and so forth, and California, especially our U.S. attorneys there, have decided that the memo does not apply to them, and California is some sort of Wild Wild West, even though if we are in compliance with SB 420. So it's a multi-layered question. Obviously, the packaging requirements in Washington and Colorado, very specific, you know, dictated from Department of Revenue and I-502 in Washington, and they have all sorts of ramifications. And this is kind of what we've been talking about for the last 4 or 5 years, which is professionalism, packaging, child-resistant containers, not child-proof, because that's a whole other thing. But it's the evolution of the industry. I was at the Champs show, which happened to co-locate here at the same time, which was pretty funny because they did not get the memo that Moms and Babes is not the order of the day yet. Here's one of their industry publications. I don't know if you can see that. So the evolution of this as a space and adult use, when it comes to packaging, professionalism, disclosing what's in the product, and giving people, adult use and patients, clear, defined choices. One thing we do know is the advent of entrepreneurial dollars into this space is making a huge impact. I'm part of the ArtView Angel Network, and I think Troy's in here too, the CEO, and we've seen an explosion in the last 12 months. We're something in the order of 75 accredited investors, including a few people that their net worth is probably in the billions, that have identified the cannabis business, the uniquely American industry, as a place that is going to come to fruition. Ian, as a leading consultant, certainly sees this every day. So I hope that wasn't too much of a roundabout answer of how packaging comes in. It depends on where you are, but the evolution is certainly going in a direction that probably cannot be stopped.
Well, what it sounds like you're saying is that when states have clear-cut regulations that allow businesses to know what they need to do in order to comply, then you have a much more regulated market with transparency and information. And when you have a system like we have in California, where we're on very unsteady ground, it makes it very difficult for businesses to fulfill their requirements and their obligations to the public. So I think that, again, just speaks to the need for regulation. Christy, did you want to say anything about that?
Sure. I think that the majority of my time is actually spent thinking about packaging, working on packaging, and there are two things that I go for. Compliance, which is obvious, don't need to get into that, and empowerment. Empowering your consumer to make good choices, having a milligram amount that you have some semblance of science and math and lab testing, hopefully, of some sort to back up, and empowering the consumer to make great choices for their physical health or their ability to recreate in a way that's responsible and fun. This plant is a companion plant, and it has so much to offer us, and without empowering new consumers and medicinal users on how to engage with it, we've lost the war. So empowerment is really my, when I think about packaging, that's all I look for.
That's great. In social work, we call that a lot of times self-determination. So like an individual's feeling that they have the ability to make choices for themselves, and that comes with a great benefit to the individual, especially individuals that may be dealing with illness.
May I say one thing in regards to packaging real quick? So in our shop, we've had the opportunity to see virtually every vendor in Colorado that wants to sell an edible. And as this industry is moving forward, there is no place for edibles that are not properly labeled. The days of 1X, 2X, 3X, whatever the hell X means, are gone, right? It is, to be in Denver Relief, you must have a measured milligram content. You must have been able to provide us testing. We take your products and we test your products and we let you know if your milligram content is different from what you say, and we explain to you why we're not going to carry the product. If you are showing a lot of unnecessary skin on your labels, I don't understand. I love a beautiful woman, but I don't know what that beautiful woman has to do with the brownie or the candy that I'm eating. You know, those are two separate things for me. So, if your product is professionally packaged, if it's labeled, if it has the ingredient listing on it, if it has the milligram content, if it tells me where it was manufactured, these are all things that are required in Colorado. If you don't have that, you're not going to be in our shop in Colorado. You're probably not going to be in California. And you probably have no business being in this industry as a so-called professional.
My background has been in marketing and sales for the last 25 years. I'm the former vice president of 2 Fortune 100 companies. The idea that people have packaging and have products and then they're afraid to put them out there, to me, just seems ridiculous. If this is a business and this is an industry, promote it. Promote, 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 promote. Coca-Cola promotes. Pepsi promotes. Keebler promotes. You know, I mean, the idea of not having promotion and not doing it well is almost just silly to me to not be in a business where you're not promoting. As far as packaging, Simply Pure led the industry in professional packaging. We actually produced machines that produce the same way that Reese's Cups and Hershey bars are all packaged. It's a foil size. It's been sealed on both ends. The stuff stays fresh forever. Chefs did our food for us. It's the best tasting things that you're ever going to have. The dosage has been done consistently and properly. When we did the packaging, we sat down with, a bunch of different designers. We designed the logo, and we designed this to be sitting on the shelves of Whole Food Market. And quite frankly, if you're not looking at actually doing a product and putting it out there and being proud of it and getting rid of the word fear, then you don't belong in the industry. This is a new industry. Promote it. Act like it's something we're proud of. Make it look pretty. Make the consumer like it. Do it. There's no other way in my mind to do business. And if you're not in this to do business, be it medicinal or whatever else, I just don't really understand why we're all having these conversations if we're going to act fearful and be afraid. We're winning. 58% of Americans want this. Act like we're winning, which we are.
It doesn't probably need to be reminded, but obvious two-legged stool of consumers that I would suggest those who are probably under 60 or so, we've all grown up with an idea that I am going to know what I'm going to put into my body. Right? I mean, that's one doesn't have to be a dyed-in-the-wool liberal to believe that there is some want to have information put in front of you before you put it in your body or put it on your hair or whatever. The other side of it, of course, is from the seller's point of view. The sellers clearly face right now, and talk about looking into the future here, because once marijuana is totally legal, there's a tort bar that's just waiting there, sharpening their knives for the same type of litigation they have successfully employed for 30 years against tobacco and other related products. And cannabis is absolutely, positively going to face those same sort of situations. So labeling and restricted packaging and everything like that, it's de rigueur.
Thank you. And then I want to move on to data.
Yeah, I'd just like to bring up one issue here regarding dosage. It is absolutely essential that there be dosage on all edible and oral consumption products, because overdosage is the biggest risk of those products. However, it's very curious to me the quantities of THC that are appearing on many products. This granola bar here, it says 100 milligrams of active THC. And this is not an untypical product. I have another one in my pack here that's a chocolate bar that has 180 milligrams of THC. It claims it's for 4 doses, which would work out to 45 milligrams a dose. The standard dosage for Marinol, the government's prescription THC drug, is 10 milligrams. And a lot of people say that that's too strong, so there is a 5 milligram pill. How is it that, I have had some of these very strong candies, and I gotta say, they don't seem all that overpowering. Even though they say 40 milligrams, it doesn't seem all that super strong to me, and I'm suspecting that there are issues having to do with how your system digests them, the bioavailability of different kinds of edibles with different sugars and different fats is something that we really need to investigate and get to the bottom of.
That's a really great point. Christy, do you have a quick?
Yeah, I do. I would just like to say that there's peer-reviewed medical research studies on marijuana edibles that indicate that a liver uptake, that if it's a 100 milligram product, that possibly anywhere from 37 to 57 milligrams are actually bioavailable. I would also like to point out, depending on your age, sex, overall health, weight, and height, that edibles will affect you differently. Someone like myself, my ideal intake would be about 3 milligrams because my endocannabinoid system isn't highly activated to THC. Whereas someone who has been using cannabis for a long time, they might need upwards of 300 milligrams to achieve the same effect.
Lauren,
Yes.
and then I want to move on.
Yes, just one thing. We had a situation, I'm really glad that we brought that up, because we advise people that when they are going to ingest, because it's suppository, sublingual, then ingesting, and then G2 as far as the absorption, and then inhalation are the different for absorption of THC. But we had a case where a parent of a patient of ours went to a dispensary last week to get some flowers to have, whatever, it doesn't matter. They picked up and they gave them an edible. They said, oh, here, try these. And they gave them a couple of the equivalent of Jolly Ranchers. And the mother, they're in their 30s, late 30s. So they said, oh, these will just relax you. And they took no labeling other than, and it was at La Brea Dispensary, whatever, down in Los Angeles. And she took it, didn't feel anything for about a half hour, gave one to her husband, and for 7 hours they could not get off of the sofa. They have a 1-year-old baby that had just had chemo, And neither of them were able, they were so frightened. If anything had happened with that baby, they could not get off the sofa. They had to call somebody to come over to help them. And that's the kind of thing that scares the living crap out of me about edibles. And the fact that people hand them out like they were Jolly Ranchers is like, here, like they're doing them a favor, giving them a little extra.
Right.
Give me.
And that's a really good point, and I think that that does speak to the need to label. However, I'll place a little bit of a devil's advocate here and say that it's also part of the consumer to look and see what you're consuming, and if it's not labeled and you don't know what's in it, you have to make that choice. And, you know, I mean, if someone gives me an edible, and I mean, I'll be honest, I have very high tolerance for cannabis. If someone gives me an edible and it does not say how much is in it, I'm going to make sure before I take it that if it does happen that it knocks me out and I'm on the couch, that that's okay. That I'm not going to, I don't have to get up and go to work or do anything. So I think, it's difficult because I think we have to meet in the middle. We have to have people that are labeling things, and we have to have consumers that understand the differences in edibles versus smoking. And so I want to kind of transition before we open it up to questions. It's something I think is a really important topic to bring up. It's about potency, and it's about dabbing. So, recently we've kind of seen dabbing come as a trend, using very, very high concentrates. And so my question to the panel, whoever wants to start, maybe Ian will start because you kind of see the population changes. Is this something that we're seeing a permanent shift in cannabis culture where dabbing is going to be this big market share of where we're going with this? Or is dabbing more a function of typical young behavior of trying to reach extreme intoxication where, instead of taking, 5 shots of Everclear, they're going to dabbing? And if that's the case, is it maybe a harm reduction technique for young people that might be binge drinking instead? So, kind of what's going on with this whole dabbing thing? There was a dab bus that was associated with Champs Expo where you just got on the bus and dabbed and then got off. And so, what's going on with this? I'm seeing, bigger market share in high times and advertising, but is it a blip or is this an actual real phenomenon?
I would say the answer to all of that is yes. Next question. So, I assume that most of you know what dabbing is. So, for those of you that don't know what dabbing is, let me tell you, dabbing 101. Dabbing is essentially a highly concentrated form of cannabis, hashish, generally extracted with the use of a solvent, the most popular one being butane right now, CO2 being another viable option. But by and large, when we speak about dabbing, we are primarily talking about a butane extraction. So the plant is dried, and there's different methods of creating it, which brings up another point which we can get into, and that's using a flammable solvent to extract. And where you're extracting, you very often hear, just as tornadoes often hit trailer parks, dabbing explosions often hit hotel bathrooms and hotel bathtubs because people have no place where they can go to make these concentrated solvents. But if you do it safely, which it absolutely can be done, there are all kinds of machines that are available now. When I was speaking about the advancement in technology with extraction methods and ingestion methods, the dabbing culture is certainly leading what's going on as far as technological innovations. So somebody extracts the plant with a chemical solvent. What's left is the essential oils and sometimes the waxes. If you do it really well, you're removing the waxes, so you have only the essential oils. It's then put into different forms. There's something called shatter, which looks like glass, almost an amber glass or a piece of amber resin, where it's very hard, and if you throw it against the wall, it'll break, but if you keep it in your hands, it'll become very sticky. There's a wax, earwax. It looks exactly like it sounds, looks like earwax. There's an oil that looks like a very thick, kind of amber-colored motor oil. And essentially what somebody does when they are dabbing is very similar to hot kniving of the 70s. somebody will take a nail, which looks not much different from a construction nail, but has a little cup at the top of it, heat it with a creme brulee torch until it's hot red, which is one of the things that dealing with a quote crack torch for cannabis consumption can have a negative stigma associated with what we're doing. So somebody heats that up till it's red hot and sticks a little dome on it so that when they touch the cannabis or the concentrate to it, the smoke doesn't dissipate and burst up in the air. So you put a little dome on it so that as the user is sucking on whatever device it is that they're sucking on, the smoke will go down and they inhale it. And it's a very, very concentrated, very quick a dab. And the effects are immediate. The effects are much stronger than if you were to smoke 2 or 3 or 4 bong hits. You can take ridiculously large dabs, but you don't have to, and it's up to the user. But essentially that's what dabbing is. It's a very highly concentrated form. We're starting to see all kinds of technological innovation. I was at an event the other night where instead of a blowtorch, they had an e-nail, and it's essentially a titanium nail that's hooked up to a soldering iron. It's dialed into the exact delivery, the exact heat level that you want, so that there is no fire. So that is the overview of dabbing, and it really is, I think, a little bit of both. The question in regards to, is it something new? Is it something that younger users are really looking for that highest high? Yes. And is it something that somebody who's in a lot of pain and suffers from insomnia and who doesn't sleep at night takes a dab and they get to sleep a full evening? Yes, it is. And will it go away? No, it will not. Will it get bigger? Yes, it will. Will there be new technological innovations? Absolutely. I think that, we talk about the negative stigma associated with smoking. How cool is it going to be when you go to the store and you buy a 6-pack of buds, however you want to call it, whether that bud is in an oil concentrate, you stick it into a little device, a known milligram content, a little tiny dab of oil into a machine or into a small vaporizer. You know that you take 2 puffs and you know that you get that desired effect because things are homogeneous, it's mixed evenly, you have the same repeatability, just like when you take an aspirin or when you take an Advil or when you eat perhaps a well-dosed Jolly Rancher. So the dabbing culture is going to continue. It's going to get more discreet. It's going to get more professional. You're going to see soccer moms dabbing while they're taking their, while their kids are playing soccer. I'm serious. With a pen, it's discreet, it's professional. They're able to maintain, just as somebody who's taking a pain pill and driving their kids to soccer. You know that happens all over the country every day, right? So yes, 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 yes.
Some people have called dabbing the crack cocaine of cannabis. I'm not judging how anybody chooses to use this substance, but this subject, or this part of the subject, you have to mention that solvent extraction in our state, the biggest cannabis state in the country, California, is specifically illegal in California Health and Safety Code. I won't state the section, but I think it's 11678.6. And it's another offense when they bust you for cannabis. So we won't go into the health issues because I think there are some serious questions. Some of our scientists have talked about the free radicals that are created from the superheating of the titanium nails that are used, and it wouldn't be something that I would be looking to ingest. But since California is the largest presently medical, soon adult use cannabis state, I think we need to say that law enforcement in our state, when they come into places now, they are specifically looking for butane and hydrocarbon extracted products. And they, in the recent bust, they have said, where's the wax? Where's the butane? Where's the machine? And because this is, when you talk about the policies here at this conference, harm reduction and so forth, is, that we jokingly mention about, the kid that gets a can of butane and blows up the apartment complex. It's a very real public safety issue. And as the leaders of our industry, if we are not going to stand up and say, yeah, we can understand that you don't want to put this, highly flammable substrate together with, a 20-year-old kid that's looking to get super high, I don't think that we're serving our industry and our movement correctly.
Yeah, but aside from this whole flammability issue, I have very serious health concern issues with the high dosage that people are getting from dabbing. And this really first made an impression on me about 3 years ago or so when Daddy was coming in. There was a cannabis cup that was held in San Francisco, and 9/11 medical emergency teams had to be called in about a half a dozen times during this 2 or 3 day event. Now that really caught my attention because we were used to having, perfectly. One thing we used to be able to assure police when we were having a pot event, hey, there's going to be no trouble. But when you have 9/11 coming in, that's a different story. And I was at another national conference not that long ago where there were 3 9/11 calls, 2 of which I witnessed personally, one of which involved somebody falling down and cracking their head on the cement. In another incident altogether, I know a woman who, my age, who had smoked more pot than I have, suddenly collapsed on the floor and cracked her front teeth. This is a serious safety concern, and if I were a state regulator looking at this, I would be very inclined not to allow it, I'm afraid. Certainly if you were having the context of a coffee shop or a public cafe where people come in and use pot, I think dabbing would raise very serious issues. And by the way, in the Netherlands, they don't allow concentrates at all.
So Wanda, I wanted to let you make a comment, and then we're going to open it up for questions, so if people are thinking about what they might want to add.
Mine's mostly about potency, and I'll agree with the butane issues. We have a lot of people blowing themselves up. We've come out against butane very early in the industry. However, I do want to caution folks, because we also own a bar and a restaurant, and in my restaurant we have, we don't. We have carried before, when you go into a restaurant or into a bar and you can order Everclear. You can also order, the world's finest wine. I think that it becomes an adult situation on how, you choose to medicate or how you choose to recreationally be responsible with it. Are there people who are going to abuse it? Yes, there are. But there is one difference, though, that we all need to understand, though, about cannabis. And while you can fall down and bust your head and knock your teeth out and do some pretty stupid things to yourself, the potency or the plant itself, you cannot die from. It cannot kill you. If I drink a bottle of Jack Daniels, I can die. I cannot die from the idea of a dab, or I may not feel good, I may be stoned for the next 6 days, but, after I sleep it off and have a cheeseburger and get my teeth fixed, from busting in the wall, I'm going to be okay. Now please know that I'm not making light of this, and I'm not recommending that people go out and fall down and bust their teeth and act like idiots in public. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying when we start to talk about this product and we go forward and we're talking about regulating this product, I always stop short of allowing people to put more regulation on cannabis than they put on alcohol, for instance, and other things in our society that are perfectly legal. So like I said, I can have as much Jack Daniels as I want, and to me that's a bigger issue than me dabbing.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point because I can see both sides. I mean, the stigma that we're already fighting around, being cannabis consumers, and now we've got this tagline of the crack cocaine of marijuana, which, is a whole other story about demonizing crack cocaine, but at the same time, we know what that does to our political will and how far we can push policies when we have that stigma attached and we hear these stories of kids passing out and doing all this. However, we also know what happens when you prohibit a practice. It doesn't go away, it just goes underground. And given that a lot of the dangers associated with dabbing and making these products are associated with doing this underground, doing it in bathtubs, doing it where you're not supposed to, my fear would be if we start to say, well, we'll just ban concentrate, we're going to have even more explosions, we're going to have even more chemicals being used and people inhaling these things that we don't want. So I think, we have to be careful about how it makes us look as an industry and a movement, but at the same time, we have to align what we know about prohibition, which is when you prohibit a behavior, it just drives it further underground. So I think it's difficult, and it's an issue that we really have to think about and struggle with how we want to come around this as an industry and a movement. So I want to open this up to questions. So maybe, can you guys line up? Is that okay? I know. All right, Radical Russ, you're up. Incognito.
I wanted to get back to that concept of the e-cigarettes and the vape pens and this being the new trend. One thing I found being a cannabis reformer for many years is as all these restrictions came up against tobacco and tobacco smoking, and you can only smoke 50 feet away from here and so on, a lot of the cannabis community just didn't pay much mind to it, or that's not our problem, kind of ignoring the evil vulnerable. Now, when I see the ads for the e-cigarettes with Jenny McCarthy and Stephen Dorff, the framing behind it, the theme behind it is take our freedom back, and it's time we retreat like adults. Is this the time now where the cannabis community starts to stick up for the tobacco community sticks up for the cannabis community, and we ally for that freedom issue rather than just what particular plant we're smoking?
Well, I have the mic, so I'll just make it short, and I'll pass it on to Dale since he worked extensively on this legislation that was proposed, and we were able to get defeated at the end of the last California legislative session. I think the answer is absolutely. We do want to join with them. There's been a recent proposal in front of the FDA to regulate e-cigarettes as a drug delivery device, trying to split thing, but tobacco has always been sort of avoided from that. So the things that they've done, but also, Alan would understand more than anybody, the multi-billion dollars that industry is starting to hit. They have the funding, they have the lobbying expertise to keep this. I feel like we should be, the vape pen and so forth, should be alive with the e-cigarette emerging industry in those things of freedom and keeping it out of the FDA-regulated drug delivery device, which would be somewhat of a killer. But Dale has worked so much on this recently, I think he should make a couple comments.
I don't think we can have alliance with the big tobacco companies. They have avoided us like the plague over the years. They're tainted anyhow, and they really want to have nothing to do with us in the first place. And the tobacco companies are the major part of the pro-tobacco lobby, right? It comes from the companies. However, let me put in a word for this group that I've been working with called CASAA, which is, does anybody know what the acronym means? CASAAA. But anyhow, they lobby for smokeless alternatives. And mainly they were thinking of tobacco, e-cigarettes. And their board is entirely non-salaried. They have a volunteer board led by a guy named Bill Goodsall, who was originally involved in lobbying for restrictions on tobacco smoking in public, but feels very strongly that the e-cigarettes are a harm reduction method. So I think we can work with this group because they are a consumer lobby and are not tainted by the way the tobacco industry is.
Okay, thanks. Next question.
Hello, my name is Dominic Napoleon from San Francisco, California. Two quick comments. So I love dabbing, and I don't think that that's going to go away. And so regulating it and trying to prohibit it, I think, is going against exactly what we're all here for. And so I think that there are definitely alternate solutions to dealing with that. So my question really is for vaporizing, dabbing, alternate ways of other than smoking the actual flower plant matter. To get to the concentrates, butane is used, and so I know that there are a lot of concerns of vaporizers and materials that use butane. And so what is the kind of information that I could disseminate to those who are concerned, who are making the concentrates, and those that want to consume the concentrates about butane?
Hi, I can address this, or I'd like to. We're working with a group of gentlemen down in San Jose that have dispensaries in LA, San Francisco. I think they've got about 5 dispensaries, I'd have to check. And they've made it their personal mission to get the butane and hexane and naphtha and all the other nasty solvents out of the dispensaries and out of the whole dabbing, the whole industry. And so what they have done is they have now bought a beautiful supercritical extraction machine that they are going to allow us, and they've allowed us to educate them in it. And they are now doing subcritical CO2 extraction. And by doing the subcritical instead of the CO2 extraction, they are able to retain more of the terpenes. Than a supercritical extraction, the pressure per square inch, if you get it to PSI, and it's not necessary, but subcritical allows you to maintain more of the terpenes. And we're even doing experimentation where we're adding terpenes back into the extract. And in this process, if you do not decarboxylate the flowers first, that it comes out into a shatter or a wax or whatever, just is potent and more so than what you're getting in the dispensaries. It's being sent and it's being tested, and it has all of the qualities that you could possibly want that you're getting from this homemade bathtub butane quality shatter and wax that you're getting in a dispensary now, except without all the harmful effects.
So I think Mara's making a good point, which is that, that's one of the things we would lose if we regulated concentrates out of the system, is that, these machines that make these really high quality concentrates are very expensive. They're not the kinds of things that people can buy for home production. So if we don't have the access to them, then people will be making things at home through, less safe means. So again, that's a vote to, keep concentrates in the regulatory framework.
I would just like to say that Dixie is coming out with a concentrate line early next year, and I'll make a commitment to you to have a Concentrate 101 downloadable on our website by March of 2014.
Okay, excellent.
Hello. I have a question about dabbing. I know that I could take wax and put it on a bong and smoke the whole bowl to my head and I'll survive and be okay. But as soon as it's put on a skillet or a rig, it will blow your mind and you'll pass out. Do you know, has there been any research on, is the actual device used for dabbing changing the way it affects us, including the blowtorch and the heat that's used to dab?
Yeah, that's a good point. Because people have been putting concentrates like hash and things on bowls and smoking them for a very long time and not having the same impact.
The first time I've heard this particular story, but anyhow, I think probably what's going on is a difference in the heat that you're exposing it to. And that's something that obviously has to be controlled on a fairly predictable way. We don't know yet what the ideal heat is.
Yeah, well, actually, when you smoke it, you're losing over 70% of it up into the air. And when you heat it at the super with the creme brulee torch, you're getting much more of it more quickly, and it's being uptaken, and the dabs have not been decarboxylated. And so you're getting the THC taken up into your receptor sites much more quickly, and it's going like immediately, right? Massive doses are just going right to your CB1 receptor sites. And that's really what's happening on a physiological basis, which is why people are getting in. I just want to let you know, even though we love dabbing, we think it's absolutely one of the most wonderful things to happen to medicine when used medicinally correctly.
Ian, did you have a comment?
Sure you have.
I love dabbing.
So there were a lot of allusions to the use of cannabis extracts for cancer treatment. allusions to the Sanjay Gupta documentary for Dravet. I have this document actually presenting overwhelming evidence that cannabis extracts can reliably eliminate cancers in humans. It's not even in a debate anymore. It works. So my question is, I can prove this to anybody here in 15 minutes that it works. But if cannabis is the proverbial cure for cancer, if it is, and I'm telling you that it is. But if it is, what does this mean for the movement, and what do we do about it?
Okay, so let's say that we have a lot of suggestions about the role that cannabinoids play in cancer treatment. Should we be, there's kind of some fear on the part of some people in the movement of saying that statement definitively, because the minute you say cannabis cures cancer, you have a bunch of people that say, no it doesn't, and I can tell you why. So how should we approach this claim, and what does it mean to our movement, and how does it vary by method of ingestion? Because individuals thinking that they can cure their cancer by smoking a joint is a very different thing than what I'm saying. People who think they can is a very different thing than using an extract like Mara makes. So how does the method of ingestion go into that cancer claim?
Okay, so two comments, and then I'll pass the mic. Essentially, I agree. I've had the pleasure of working in medical cannabis for 4 years with amazing results. And I have a patient I worked with rectal cancer that we made suppositories for to great effect, and he is still alive today. So there is peer-reviewed medical research available online that is probably the same document that you have with you. But I will also say there is concern, and I don't want this to be taken away. And this is a fear-based comment, my apologies, but I want to be pragmatic in our approach to who and win the hearts and minds of people individually, because right now we're a small, passionate group, very passionate, but if we can fill this room or get the entire hotel to tell 10 other people, that's when we can really own that conversation. And it's about empowerment and owning the message.
Yeah, I would say we should, in all circumstances, avoid saying that cannabis cures cancer. Scientifically, it's completely unsubstantiated, and the medical community would rightly be outraged by this. I talked to my own doctor, my own cancer doctor, in fact, Dr. Donald Abrams, who's an expert on this sort of thing, and Dr. Lester Grimspooner, our good friend and mentor, and they are very concerned about claims that cannabis can cure cancer because that induces people to give up proven, effective, so traditional mainline cancer treatment. And there have been cases, as Dr. Grimspooner was telling me, of patients he has lost because they forewent the traditional treatment and tried to rely on cannabis, and they died. And by the way, I know a lot of heavy pot smokers who've gotten cancer, including myself.
Doesn't work.
So, and the history of quacks who have claimed, I've got a cancer cure, this goes back over a century. So you're really setting yourself up for being labeled as a quack if you make such claims. Nobody can claim that you've cured any cancer at all until the cancer has been gone for 5 years. And Dr. Abrams points out there is no such documented case whatsoever as of yet. Now there might be. I think it makes sense as, if you have cancer, to supplement your therapy with cannabis. There's good evidence to think maybe it might be helpful, especially in certain cancers. Go ahead and do it, but by all means, don't rely on it.
Thank you. Quick comment.
This is important, especially since this is I cringe when somebody says cannabis cures cancer, because I don't believe it. I don't believe that there's such a thing as a cure for cancer, no matter how many years, because I think cancer is something that is controlled in the body. And I think that cannabis is a phenomenal integrated tool that is used along with good medicine from other sources, with diet, with exercise. It's a mind-body spirit that kills cancer. And cannabis is a phenomenal tool, and we've had remarkable success. But to tell somebody that we're going to give you 60 grams in 90 days, and you're going to go from this to this to this, and you're going to take this, and you're going to be puking your guts out, and then you're not going to have cancer, and we're going to videotape you, and you're going to tell these people, I think it's criminal. And I will not support that in any way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mara.
I welcome the challenge, by the way.
Okay, we're going to move on. Real quick, you want to respond real quick, and then I want to make sure we get more questions.
Of the 22,000 studies plus of cannabis, the largest group today is in the cancer research, as it should be. Everybody in this room will be touched by cancer personally or secondarily, so it's a huge market. It's the most fascinating place where cannabis research is going on, but I agree with everybody here who's put out this forewarning that you cannot seriously go out into public and claim cannabis cures cancer.
Thank you. Next question?
Doug Willinger, Freedom of Medicine and Diet. What work has been done on using these new devices for basically opiates and coca extracts, using them either to replicate opium smoking or even heroin injection? You can conceivably do it that way depending upon the concentration. Or with coca, even like as an alternative. We used to have coca leaf cigarettes in the late 1800s. There's a whole history of that. You go to my blog, Freedom of Medicine and Diet, look up coca leaf cigarettes and cheroots. And those are low dose, safe, and would be a safer alternative, actually, than the nicotine version we have now.
So has there been any, that's a really interesting point. What about vaporizers for opiates, or vaporizers for coca, or amphetamines?
Stay with me.
Well, there's certainly researchers and entrepreneurs that are looking to expand into coca leaves, no doubt about it.
Okay. Question?
Sure, great. Hi, my name is Mike. I've been out here for 4 years doing retail operations and development for dispensaries. My question essentially is, how are we going to stop or limit this fear-driven, nasty separation of medical versus recreational? To me, all a recreational patient is someone that hasn't been educated enough by us, by our community, on the value-added benefits of this plant. Who is a recreational user? Regardless how you ingest the plant, you're getting medical value out of it. Why are we separating our community?
I love that comment. And the reason why I love it, when I talk about cannabis all the time, and like I said at the very beginning, you can have an aspirin to stop a heart attack, you can have an aspirin to stop a headache. It's so hard for us in Western hemisphere of this world to accept the fact that medicine does not have to be, shot in your body with some, huge hypodermic needle, or taste horrible, or you have to go to your doctor and sit there for 6 hours to get chemo, or whatever it may be. Especially when you're talking about, as we've all talked about it here, the whole mind, body, and spiritual experience of healing oneself. Our society is overwhelmed with anxiety issues, with sleep deprivation issues. The whole idea that we are stressed out all the time. Those are all healthcare issues. So if we can find things in our society, which quite frankly we have been self-medicating now for hundreds of years with alcohol, with cocaine, with heroin, with cannabis, whatever it may be, but the idea that of all of those substances, this is the one thing that actually does bring some benefit. I don't think anybody's ever downed a bottle of vodka and said, wow, I felt better the next morning. That's never happened. So, the idea that we can actually feel better while being recreational about it and not causing harm to our bodies is, I think, a whole new for the idea of Western medication. And I think that that's the idea and the issue that we're having with a lot of politicians, quite frankly, that can't seem to get through their head that, yes, this makes you giggle, this makes you have a good time, it relaxes you, and it may also help end your sleep issues, it may help end your anxiety issues, and for veterans, it may help end your PTSD issues. So if we can start to look at healing oneself and feeling good at the same time, we're in a good place.
Sure, but with that said, the word recreational continues to backstep us because we're not using the right words. Recreational means
it's adult use.
It's adult use. Exactly. I just think that really needs to be part of our community, the words that we use.
And I think it is here in Colorado, and I would argue that Colorado is a little bit more advanced in terms of development, in terms of vocabulary and semantics. I would also argue that if you really want to get down into it, it's all medical to some degree, because What I use it for my anxiety or my therapeutic benefits, and call it what you want. It's medical. It's helping me. I'm feeling better about myself. That is, whatever you want it to be. The difference between medical and recreational. The reason why we are differentiating it here in Colorado is because we are in the middle of a cultural shift. And in order to educate the public and in order to make it so that it becomes a reality, we eased in the use of medical use. The general public realized the sky didn't fall. The kids aren't all out on the streets dabbing in public at all times of every day. Teen use has decreased in Colorado since medical took effect. And so now we are coaching in to the understanding that all adults who choose to, in their own home, that want to medicate or smoke or whatever it is that you want to call it, are doing so. And so it's one and the same, but it's that cultural shift, and it's the evolution of the ending of prohibition. And it's what allows us to get around these cultural stigmas and make way to get there. I believe strongly in medical marijuana. I don't think that it's a sham. I think that it worked. I think that there is a real reason for medical marijuana here, and it's good that we started this, and it's now allowing it to take place to understand that recreational use is effectually still medical.
Thank you. So did anyone else have anything to say about that before we close? I'm sorry for those that didn't get to ask questions.
One very, very quick thing. There is an actual difference, a little bit. It all is medical. It all is medicinal from the standpoint that it.
All right, folks, that's all the time we've got on that particular panel. The rest of it didn't get recorded, but I just want to address a couple of points there. I get very, very tired of the people who say that I, as a recreational smoker, am ignorant and have no idea what I'm talking about because my use is really medical. No, I know exactly what I'm doing. My use is sometimes medical, it's sometimes recreational. But the people who continue to want to say all use is medical are suffering from the delusion that somehow recreational use is bad or dirty or somehow undesirable. We don't need to run away from the term recreational use. We don't need to run away from the terms adult use. All use doesn't have to be medical. People who are saying that are trying to provide themselves a fig leaf of cover for some sort of shame that they're taking upon themselves, as if they don't have a good enough excuse to use marijuana, there's something shameful in it. And I refuse to kowtow to that idea. Recreational use is perfectly okay. If someone's just bored and wants to get high for fun, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, and we don't have to shy away from that anymore. And the other thing I wanted to get to is that guy. I love it when someone with absolutely no medical, scientific, chemistry, biological training or background gets in front of a panel of experts and explains to them how he has absolute definitive proof that cannabis cures cancer. I have talked to Dr. Lester Grinspoon. I've interviewed Dr. Don Abrams. I've interviewed oncologists. I've interviewed people that are very pro-medical marijuana. And every one of them will tell you that cure is a really big word and cancer is a really broad term. Now, I'm not denying that lots of people have gotten great results from using cannabis. Our own brave Michaela has got more hair than I do now. Well, so do most people. But she's doing great, in part thanks to the cannabis that she has been using as part of her treatment. And many other people have that same result that they can tell you about how cannabis has helped them deal with their cancer. But if cannabis cured cancer, Steve Veteran would still be with us. If cannabis cured cancer, Michelle Rainey would still be with us. There are a whole lot of people who used serious, intense treatments of Rick Simpson oil and all of these other cannabis oils who had cancer and still died. So let's not give false hope to people. Let's tell them that cannabis is a great adjunct treatment for cancer. It is probably the secret for unlocking future treatments that will be even better for treating cancer. But there's lots of different cancers, there's lots of different stages, there's lots of different effects, and it is too soon yet to say cannabis cures cancer. We'll talk about that on a future show, but that's all the time we got for today. Thanks for hanging with me while I'm a little bit sick. I'll be in Boise, Idaho tomorrow and the rest of next week, giving you live shows from the Gem State. For Brian the Red, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
We love you. This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it.